This is Joshua. He doesn't look very happy right now, although he really should. You see, he is standing on the very land that God promised to give to his ancestor Abraham's descendants over 500 years earlier, and that's not all. Joshua had just led those descendants in a victorious and a very unusual battle that was held in a little place called Jericho. The battle at Jericho was unusual because, at God's instruction, Joshua and his army walked around the walled city of Jericho once a day for 6 days in a row, and on the 7th day they marched around 7 times. Then the priests blew their horns, and the people shouted, and the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. So Joshua should have been in a great mood, right? However, not long after Jericho, Joshua and his army faced another battle in a place called Ai. Ai was the next city that the Israelites needed to capture as they took over the Promised Land. Ai was so small that Joshua didn't even send many men to conquer it. However, they were easily defeated, with 36 of their men killed by the soldiers of Ai. When Joshua heard of their defeat, he became very upset. He tore his clothes and threw himself on the ground. Crying out to the Lord, he said, "Lord, why did you bring us all this way here to this land, only to allow us to suffer such a humiliating defeat? Now our enemies will see how weak we are, and they will surely chase us down and destroy us." God replied to Joshua,
"Get up! What are you doing laying there on the ground? This happened because the people of Israel stole things that should have been devoted only to me. And until those devoted things are destroyed, you'll never be able to stand before your enemies."
In order to find out what devoted things God was talking about, we have to go back to the morning of the 7th day that the Israelites marched around the walled city of Jericho. Joshua got the people together and said, "Look, there's going to be some marching and there's going to be some shouting. Afterward, the walls will come down. And when they do, you must remember that everything must be destroyed as a devotion unto God. Also remember that you are not to touch the gold or silver, for it is to go into God's treasury. And if you do, you will bring destruction upon Israel." So the Israelites were warned not to touch what was devoted to God, but someone didn't listen. And as a result, what should have been an easy battle at Ai was instead a great defeat. Upon hearing what God said, Joshua was determined to find the culprit. So he arose early the next morning and, with God's help, he searched high and he searched low until he came before the very person who stole from God. His name was Achon, and it didn't take him long until he admitted to what he had done. He said to Joshua, "I saw a beautiful cloak and gold and silver, and I coveted them, and so I took them and hid them inside my tent." Achon had ignored God's warning and coveted what didn't belong to him, and as a result, he and his entire family, along with everything that belonged to them, were destroyed. So what can we learn from the story of Achon? Here are 3 things to think about. Pre-sin. In a way, coveting is like pre-sin. It's the thing that often leads to it. Achon admitted that he had coveted the treasure, and then he took it. We need to think about what we're thinking about, and then adjust our actions accordingly, so that we can be a light in a dark world. The tithe. Jericho was essentially a tithe of the Promised Land. Just like God wants us to give Him the first 10% of our income and trust Him to provide the rest, God wanted the Israelites to give Him the spoils from their first city they conquered in the Promised Land. Greed will get you stoned. Although Achon didn't know it at the time, in all the following cities that the Israelites conquered, God allowed them to keep the treasure for themselves. If Achon had not been so greedy, he would have had more gold and silver and beautiful cloaks than he could fit in his tent. God will always provide us what we need and then some. We just need to keep our eyes on Him